you're having difficulty sleeping, again, related to menopause or perimenopausal symptoms, and brushed off as, oh, you're anxious or you have insomnia and given a sleeping pill, lots of other things. So as I've entered into this new phase in my life, I have become much more sympathetic to the struggles of my menopausal patients, perimenopausal patients, and really started diving deeper into the research and some other things and really fascinating things that we can do. For someone who doesn't want to partake in any type of menopause hormone therapy, for some, it might absolutely be the right thing to do. Others who don't want to or have other risk factors that choose not to, there are some things that you can do to help alleviate some of the symptoms that you might be struggling with. But I want to get to the weight gain because, is it not bad enough that we have to have a period every single month, unless you're pregnant, since you're a teenager, for decades, and then you have to go through menopause and all the things that come with it? It just doesn't seem fair. It just doesn't seem fair. Just throw that out there. It's the thoughts that go through my head. Like, seriously. Anyway, why is there weight gain after menopause? Well, before menopause, estrogen influences the distribution and the accumulation of body fat. So here's an explanation. So before menopause, you have estrogen production, right? So in premenopausal women, the ovaries produce the significant amounts of estrogen, which directly impacts your fat distribution. First, you have your subcutaneous fat accumulation. So this is the accumulation that is just under the skin. So if you pinch it, that's where we would see that. This is where fat is supposed to be stored, right? So estrogen promotes the accumulation of fat to be stored in these subcutaneous deposits, particularly like in our hips, in our thighs, in our buttocks. This is thought to prepare us for, potential pregnancy and lactation. There's an additional thing that estrogen affects. It's called lipoprotein lipase activity. So estrogen influences the activity of this. It's also called the LPL, and it's an enzyme that plays a kind of a key role in breaking down triglycerides. So that's the fats in your blood. And what happens when it breaks it down in the bloodstream for storage in the adipose tissue? So for premenopause, there's a higher LPL activity in the subcutaneous fat, especially in the lower body, which leads to more fat being stored there in those areas. So you have the triglycerides, they're being broken down and told, okay, you're going to subcutaneous fat to be stored. In addition, you have fat cell size, right? So estrogen also affects the size of the fat cells, particularly in your subcutaneous fat, allowing for larger cells that can store more fat. And there's an interesting thing called the personal fat threshold that you can speak to, and insulin resistance. It's more of a hypothesis, but I think it's definitely a working theory that's probably very true. But as your fat cells grow, as someone gains more and more weight, it can actually outgrow its ability to be fed by the blood, right? So it cannot get nutrients, because remember, your adipose tissue is an endocrine organ. It actually releases hormones and different things. And when that happens, you'll get kind of a destruction of the cell, and it breaks down, releases the fatty acids, free fatty acids, into the bloodstream, and it causes inflammation. It recruits inflammatory cells to come and clean up the mess, releases inflammatory cytokines and stuff, and that can lead to inflammation, insulin resistance. That's a whole nother topic, which I speak to actually in our glucose mastermind, which I do have an open registration now. If you're interested, you can go to drmarbs.com. But we spoke about this last night for about an hour and a half. It was a really interesting conversation. But getting back to it, the estrogen actually allows your cells to be able to grow larger. And there's also not only just your mature adipocytes or fat cells, but also there's premature, ready, kind of sitting in the sidelines waiting to be called in. And that can be affected too. Anyway, and then moving on, metabolism, right? So high levels of estrogen are associated with the higher basal metabolic rate, which can help maintain your energy balance and prevent significant weight gain, despite your tendency to gain more subcutaneous fat. So then what happens after menopause? Well, a few different things. First of all, you get that decline in estrogen, which we all understand what that does, many, many things. You get that change in fat distribution. So now, because of the decrease in estrogen, it alters the body's distribution pattern, right? So you have fat storage shifts from subcutaneous fat to the visceral fat. And that's in the lower, like, abdominal area, and it's in around the organs, which is the place that can be really a big deal of issue. As someone enters also into insulin resistance, you'll see the visceral fat also increase. You'll get fat stored in the liver, the pancreas, the muscles, other things, and it can be a really big issue with inflammation. And as you get the visceral fat accumulation, what's happening here is that, remember that LPL, that little enzyme I was talking about, it actually, because there's an increase in the activity in the abdominal area outside, not in the subcutaneous area anymore. So the estrogen promotes it to say, hey, go store here in the adipose tissue in the subcutaneous fat. But when you have the decrease of estrogen, the LPL becomes more active in the visceral fat storage areas around the abdomen. Hope that makes sense. And then, of course, there's insulin sensitivity. With lower estrogen leads to insulin resistance because the fat is now being stored from subcutaneous fat to your visceral fat. You also have a change in your metabolic rate, which, again, how frustrating is this? There's also estrogen can affect the secretion of what we call adipokines, and these are signaling proteins secreted by fat cells. So remember, the fat cell is an endocrine organ in itself, if you can think of it that way. So changes in these can lead to pro-inflammatory state and then further accumulating the visceral fat. So amazing to think that the fat cell will actually produce things that can actually be anti-inflammatory. So when you have the estrogen go away and it decreases that release of that particular adipokine, it can be a real big issue. Appetite regulation. Estrogen can play a role in regulating ghrelin and leptin, right? So these are hormones involved in hunger and satiety. So changes in estrogen levels can disrupt the balance of the hormones, and then that can maybe lead to more caloric intake and, again, more weight gain. And then muscle mass, right? So we see a decrease in muscle mass after menopause. It's hard to say, is this because we're just at an age where we're not as active? Most likely, because you can see things shift as someone actually pays attention and actually promotes exercise in the sense of building muscle. So if you do resistance training, building your lean muscle mass will help with, one, increasing your basal metabolic rate. It'll also make you more insulin sensitive. And when you're paying attention to the portion size and the amount of calories and the particular calorie that you're consuming, that can help as well. I know it's not fair that we go through life and we have to, like I said, deal with, periods every month, and then have to go through menopause and all the wrath that it brings along with it. Some women just sail through it smoothly, no issues. Others really struggle. And it was really fascinating to read about how, I believe, I don't have the exact numbers right in front of me, but by year 2, like 65% of women were still having hot flashes. By year 5, it was like 30% or something. By 10 years or something, it was like 10%. I mean, it was this ridiculous number of poor women who were suffering because, my mom and my grandmother suffered tremendously with hot flashes. I remember them just like suddenly going, oh man, it's warm. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm a healthy eater, whole food, plant-based, eat soy products daily, do everything I'm supposed to, and I'm still getting hot flashes. They're not severe, but they're enough to get my attention. And the new nickname is called internal combustion because literally that's what it feels like. She was like, there's a little internal combustion going on here. And I've never been one to be overly warm. I've always been on the other end where I've always been kind of on the cooler side. Like I'm always like, man, it's so cold in here. When everyone's like, it's just right. Not anymore. So anyway, in summary, let me just go over. So before menopause, estrogen affects a few different things, right? It tells your body to store in subcutaneous fat, and the lipoprotein lipase activity is telling the body to store fat in the subcutaneous fat. Your fat cell size can get larger, and you have higher metabolism. After menopause, you have the decline in estrogen. Now the LPL enzyme is like, well, we don't need you storing fat in your subcutaneous fat anymore. We need you to go over here to your visceral fat. That's where we're going to store. And then with visceral fat accumulation comes many, many side effects: increased inflammation, insulin resistance, and metabolic changes, increased risk for heart attack, stroke, all those things. And then just the hormone changes, that the fat tissue is no longer releasing the adipokine secretion. So, and then we have muscle mass. So that is the big picture. I will be probably starting one of my glucose masterminds in January, and it's going to be kind of involving everything for women, in particular, your glucose, basically monitoring your glucose. So insulin resistance, you'll get a CGM. We're going to speak to menopause and weight reduction, and weight loss. So you don't have to be in menopause or perimenopausal to join, but we're going to speak to these things and how we can utilize CGM and some other technology to really help and understand, potentially labs, how we can improve our health by just paying attention to a few different things, habit formation, all those good things. It's going to be a lot of fun. Each class runs 3 months. We meet twice a month. I'm going to be increasing the length of each class starting in December from an hour to an hour and a half, because there's so much information that we share and discuss in our group. And it's live. You'll get the CGM, send it to any pharmacy in the country that you want, and you get a year's worth of refills. For me, if it's a tool that you can utilize, I'm happy to share that with you. So anyway, if you're interested in joining this upcoming cohort, I'm already getting people signing up. So I do have limited capacity because I want to make sure I give attention to the folks that are there. And you can go to drmarbus.com, click on Glucose Mastermind, and feel free to join from there. And then we'll send you the information. But there you go. That's all I had today. I'm going to jump on and do a podcast interview with my dear friend, Catherine Van Tassel. And so be looking out for that. It's going to be a 3-part series on food addiction. And I think it's really pertinent, especially right now around the holidays, as many of us struggle with just sometimes, holidays aren't the best or the happiest time for people. And food might be our one soothing thing that we can utilize, and that leads us down to more health challenges. So anyway, hope this was helpful. And let me know if there's other things you'd like me to speak to. But, just kind of going through this in my own life. And just thinking again, it's just not quite fair, but that's okay. I did have one other question. So I did a live a couple of days ago about I am. I've had a lot of positive comments about that, kind of the mindset and how we speak to ourselves and how we are precious and say the words I am. And don't follow that with anything that's derogatory, because you are something amazing. So I am love. I am kind. I am kindness. I am strong. I am courageous. So there's this space that I've had here for a year. This is real. And I don't know if any of you guys knew, but I paint and draw. And I actually went through medical school because I published some cartoons. I'll have to show you that story later. But cartoons actually got me through medical school, believe it or not. And anyway, I want to draw or paint something around, I think, the I am foundational words. So I would love to hear your input. What do you think that should look like? I have a few ideas, like it'll say I am, and maybe it's like a flower with shapes meaning different things, like I am love, I am kindness, I am strength. But I think that would be a really cool thing to see every single day, and I would love to create that. So if you have any ideas, tell me what you think I should paint up there, and I'll share my process with you. Okay, bye guys. Have a good rest of your day.